Come join Melissa and her guests on the Chats from the Blog Cabin podcast. From North Carolina, this podcast will have you feeling like you've known these folks for years. Listen in as they chat about life, culture, current events, and more, all with a special Southern flair. Curl up with your favorite beverage and get ready to be entertained. Tune in now for a unique experience that's fun and insightful.
Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of Chats from the Blog Cabin, the show where I virtually invite people into the Blog Cabin to chat about life. And if you've been here, the whole month of March is about women's history. And so every day in March, I am honoring women. I am interviewing women. I'm giving solo tributes. I'm also doing a little bit of history lessons. So today, before we start off and before I introduce my guests, I want to start off with a quote by a woman. It says, "Alone we can do so little, together we can do so much." And it's by Helen Keller. And I picked out this quote specifically for you, Jen, because I felt like this was perfect. Jen is joining me. She's the author of Befriending Betsy, co-author of Befriending Betsy, I should say. And Jen, tell us about yourself before we get into about the book, because the book, my gosh, the book is so great.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I'm an author and a book coach from Ottawa, Canada. I used to be a high school English teacher, and then I decided I wanted to focus more on my literary endeavors. So I dove into my own writing. I have a couple of young adult novels that are out there in the world. And I worked with a book coach, and I had no idea that such a thing existed. When I found her, it's like a sports coach. It's somebody who helps you get better at your writing. She was offering training programs. I thought, this is fantastic because I was already an educator. This is a great way to marry my two interests. So I dove into book coaching. And while I was doing that, I came across a client, Chips, who's Betsy's husband. Betsy is my co-author in this book. And he explained to me that he had a manuscript from his wife who had died a few years earlier. Could I help him get it published? He also recognized that it was a draft. So it was most definitely a work in progress. And he wondered, could I help with that? Could I do some editing with that? And because of my interest in book coaching and writing and teaching, that's how it all came together, that Chips ended up contacting me to see if I could help. And as I was working on this project, it was definitely a rough draft. As every writer knows, there's different progressions in a writing process, and nothing is going to be right the first time. So when I was looking at it, I thought of all the things that I would be able to talk to Betsy about had she been around, had she been my client, to say, okay, let's focus on this, this, and this. And she wasn't. And Chips had made it clear he's not a writer. He wasn't prepared to do all of the edits and changes. But I thought all of these stories were very much anecdotes. They were so cute. They were so awesome. They were so impassioned, but they were all very separate. And the more that I got into reading Betsy, like I said, I kept feeling like I want to just call her up and I don't want to talk to her about this and I want to ask her about this. And I felt like I was getting to know her as an individual. And that's what got me thinking, wait a second, maybe there's something more that I can do for Betsy's stories. Could I put into her stories my own narrative framework about how I got to know her? So not only do we see her stories were about her animal welfare efforts to rescue and foster cats and some dogs and a blind pigeon too, for that matter. And I thought, how could I also get Betsy's out there in the story as well? So that's how the story came about, just from my work as a book coach, my previous experience as a writer. I thought, yeah, maybe I can put some of myself into the story as a way to better highlight how I befriended Betsy.
And so when did that idea come to you? Early on when you were reading the manuscript, or was it toward later on?
So the idea of, I really wish I could meet her, I really wish I could talk to her, that came early on because I was so intrigued with her voice. Voice is a really difficult concept for writers. It makes sense as a reader, you're reading this character or you're reading about that person. It makes sense in something where there is audio, you can hear voice. But as a writer, how do you write voice? And Betsy she had written in her stories, there was this sass, there was this passion, all that came, like I knew it was her and how she was writing about her story. So from her first drafts, just reading her voice, I wished that I could have picked up the phone and called her and said, let's talk about this. I want to hear more. It wasn't until I was going through the editing process and looking at how each of these stories were separate that I started to think, wait a second, maybe I could take this nugget of an idea that I had about how I wished I could meet her and how I felt like I got to know her. Maybe I could use that as a narrative thread. So it was a bit of an evolution.
So how much time did you spend talking or chatting with her husband to find out more about her? Because you learn more about people when you talk to people that have been around them.
Absolutely. And we set up a whole bunch of Zoom interviews, so that I could chat with him too. It was a bunch of hours worth for sure, but it wasn't anything so we didn't go so deep that I was losing what was in the story. So Chips was there very much to help me fill in some pieces. And especially if something in a draft was not entirely clear, the timeline, for example, what's the chronology of this? He said, oh, we lived in this house or we were going here. So that was all very helpful. I certainly got his perspective of Betsy, and I'd like to think that that also shone through. There's so much love that he has for her and that she had for him as well. So I definitely wanted that to shine through. But it was more about how could I get my interpretation of Betsy, because I thought that was most valuable for other readers as well. I kind of felt like I was becoming a bit of the avatar for the average reader out there who wants to learn more about Betsy and her cats and her dogs and her own life and story. So absolutely, Chips helped with that. But I also wanted to make it my own as a way to say to the readers, here's Betsy, isn't she amazing?
So what has been his response to the novel being out?
He's really heartened by the response that we've gotten from it. He always meant for this to be a legacy for his wife, and he wasn't sure exactly how to go about it at first. And so I stepped in, and we've been partners in this journey ever since. So when it finally came out, he explained to me he had been somewhat reluctant to advertise what we were doing as we were getting started. And so not all of his friends and the people in his life were aware of just how far we'd come by the time the book came out last December. And they were just so impressed and so pleased that Betsy's voice, Betsy's stories, Betsy's legacy was still out there. So I think we done good for Betsy.
So in the beginning, when he came to you and wanted to write it and wanted you to co-author, did you have any hesitation at all about it, or were you like, yes?
No, actually, it was the reverse. He wasn't the one who said, "Hey, can you co-author this with me?" He said, "Hey, can you edit this and let's see whether you can help me get it published." And that's when I came back and said, "I wonder if." What do you think? It was a bold move on my part to go to him and say, what do you think I put my name on your wife's work? But the more we talked about it, the more he could see the value of this framework in order to tie the stories together in a way that highlighted Betsy. Because Betsy was the type of person who always focused on her animals. Her stories were so much about her animals that she downplayed her own value in these stories by explaining in this bold way, hey, Chips, I have this idea. What do you think? It was a way for me to explain to him, I think, that we'll be able to get across Betsy's vibrant personality a little bit better if I co-author this with her. What do you think? And he was like, yeah, absolutely. Let's try it. Let's see what happens. So he was very supportive from this, perhaps somewhat crazy idea at the start.
So why did you decide to be so bold and suggest it? Because some people would have said, you know what? Yeah, okay, we'll see what I can do. But, yeah.
You know what? That's such an excellent question. I kind of have been asking myself that for the past few years now. I really think it came from Betsy's voice. I've worked with a lot of clients, and I've also had the opportunity to work as a ghostwriter on a client's work I'm writing about their mom, two sisters. I'm writing about their mom who died years before. So I've had to interview family and friends. So I've started to learn how to talk about people who died, from different perspectives. And Betsy's voice just struck me as something so alive that when I was editing the stories, I just, especially because I knew that Chips wanted this book as a legacy, I just thought, I wonder if maybe I could do a little bit more to help him get that story out there. I think that's it. I don't know. I certainly didn't sit down at the beginning of that calendar year and decide one of my goals for this year was going to be fill in this crazy plan. It was Betsy herself. She just got me.
Yeah, I can see that 100%. We need to take a brief commercial break, but we will be right back after that.
When cancer crashed into my life, it tried to take everything. My health, my career, even my joy. Hands-free! Yeah! But I refused to let it. Instead, I discovered something powerful, that laughter and hope and small moments of joy could be just as powerful as any prescription. I've worn many hats: entrepreneur, consultant, speaker, and most importantly, mom. But the role I never expected, cancer thriver. And I realized that my story isn't just mine. It's something that others needed too. My book, Finding Hope and Joy in Cancer, is part survival guide, part pep talk, and yes, even part comedy special for your soul. It's raw, it's real, it's filled with wisdom and stories and laughs that helped carry me through treatment and beyond. Over the years, I've built companies and communities, but this mission is different. It's about building resilience, one story at a time. My mission is simple. Hope, it's not optional. It's essential. And joy, it's waiting for you, even in the hardest chapters of your life. I'm Amanda Gunville, speaker, author, and cancer thriver. And I'm here to talk about humor, resilience, and what it really takes to find joy when life feels impossible.
In a world full of chaos, she chose to anchor her story in hope. Through storms and silence, she found strength, and now she's inviting you to do the same. This isn't just a book, it's a lifeline. For every woman who's ever felt unseen, your healing begins here. Anchored in Hope. Available now.
And we are back with Jen, who co-authored Befriending Betsy. Cute little book. Oh my gosh, so cute. So, Jen, I'm going to ask you to read part of the book. So it's all yours.
All right, thank you. Well, I'm choosing an excerpt from Betsy's, one of the first stories that I include in the book that Betsy wrote about trying to rescue a stray dog downtown Dallas. This was one of those stories that had me laughing so hard as I was reading her first draft that I thought, oh my goodness, I wish I had known this lady in real life. So she's in Dallas. I'd been downtown that day where I'd spotted a sorry skeleton of a tail wagger, an unquestionably underfed dog living in an unforgiving asphalt jungle, alone adrift among the churning currents of oblivious people, and in desperate need of a friend. I was on the job. I did my due diligence. I asked around about the mutt, but my plethora of earnest "pardon me, sir" utterances garnered only suspicious side sneers. We were alone. I looked at him, he looked at me. "You're coming with me," I told him. Only how? We were several blocks from the parking garage in my car. He was not my well-trained pet who would easily follow, but he was waist high and much too cumbersome to cradle. Oh, and he was a very artful and supersonic darter at that. I didn't dare leave him to his own 2-minute his own 2-minute mile in the tangle of the noon-hour hubbub to search out some kind of tether. I had no belt. My dressed up for downtown duds did not assume a makeshift dog leash would be necessary. And my one-handed rummaging through my bottomless handbag did not turn up anything remotely ropish. Mary Poppins, I was not. But as I dodged the hyperdog's legs, my own came to mind. Well, not my legs per se, but rather my now torn stockings on my legs. Perhaps my dressed up for downtown duds did assume a makeshift dog leash after all. So amid a swarm of bumper-to-bumper passers-by in downtown Dallas in the middle of the workday, I stripped out of said stockings and tied them securely around my new furry attention deficit friend. And you know what? The pantyhose became the perfect restraint for my new raging beast. Every dog has his day of learning who's who in charge, and this bucking bronco had a steep learning curve. Perhaps, if you are a dog lover, you may remember your maiden voyage behind a clueless rocket-propelled pooch. Perhaps you remember the chaos. Now, if you had a pipsqueak cockapoo, it would have been no problem, right? But picture this same fish on the line fight with a 50-pound hound dog. With bungee cord tension from a pantyhose leash, I may have shrieked on the alpha-like as we slalom through the human obstacle course. But it worked. My MacGyvering got us both to the car, though I felt as if I'd hauled in the catch of the day instead of a down on his luck dog.
I love that. And I'm laughing at that because of the pantyhose. Who would have thought to pull up pantyhose and put a dog around panty leash? I mean, literally, that's so funny. It's like those little stories that she adds in. It just makes you want to. I see where you wanted to meet her because her personality just shines through on those stories.
Absolutely. She just sounded larger than life. And at first when I was going through the edits and reading her stories, you know, she sounded someone like, as I said, she wasn't putting herself into the stories, but her voice was shining through. But I thought, like, oh my goodness, she is a saint. Wow, I would never have thought to do that. I probably wouldn't even have noticed the poor dog, let alone thought, how am I going to help the poor dog? And then I started to think to myself, like, oh wow, wait a second, maybe she is a saint. Damn, like, how am I supposed to relate to that? But she was very frank. She was very self-effacing in some senses, but also very critical in others, the people that she had no patience for, especially those who abused and abandoned animals necessarily. She had a mouthful to say about them. She wasn't always kind to everybody, meaning that she said it like she saw it. And as much as I admire that, that was also something that I could relate to, in the sense that, okay, you know, maybe she wasn't entirely perfect. And that made me love her even more. That made me think she is someone relatable. She's vivacious, she's zesty, she's, you know, over the top in some senses in what she was willing to do for her animals. But she also struggled. She also had some really hard days with these animals. She had fights with her husband over the cost that and the pressure that this was putting on them as a family. And it was all of that together that made me think, okay, she's not just this great funny saint, she's also just a real person. And she let us know that.
Yeah, I think one of the stories that she wrote in the book, but you helped clarify, was when they were moving and they were going down to Florida for the winter, and they bought a travel trailer just so that they could take all their cats with them. And I'm like, who would go out of their way to do that?
Isn't that amazing? I couldn't believe it when I first read that story. And that was one of the things I definitely had to ask Chips about. Like, okay, really, you've got to tell me, did you actually go and buy a trailer so that you could cart these 13 cats down halfway across the country? And he said, yep, that's exactly what we did. We wanted to go south. They wanted to, have a bit more flexibility, a bit more mobility. But Betsy was not willing to leave the cats, not like they all travel very well. She wasn't about to leave them. She wasn't about to put that responsibility on other people. She felt very strongly it was her responsibility or their responsibility. These were some cats that she couldn't find foster homes for or adopted permanent homes for because of their personalities, because of their own trauma, the poor kitties. And she wasn't giving up on them. And she made it work. She found a way, with Chips, of course, who was so supportive of this, to make sure that these cats were continually cared for while still living the life that she and her husband wanted.
I mean, that blew me away. And then when I read also about the one cat, and I forget the name, that he ended up having to stay separate from the rest of the cats because he was like the biggest bully.
And that's what she was really good about explaining too. We often think, and anyone who's adopted a stray, an animal from the Humane Society or from other organizations, you don't know what you're getting. And Betsy didn't either when she was picking these little strays up. And the ones who were cute and who were so people friendly, they were gone, right? She wasn't in the business to keep all of these cats because she wanted all of these cats. She was doing them to give them a better life. And those, especially the kittens, they were easily able to be adopted out, and that was wonderful. But there were some struggles, and some people, some readers may also be able to relate to that, to having had an animal in their house who is very difficult and perhaps shy or difficult around people. How do you deal with that? And I think she was really frank about her struggles with that, how hard it was, like you said, to keep some of the cats had to be separated.
And to me, I mean, that showed that she still had the love for him. She didn't see the cat as being like, yes, it was destructive. Yes, it was a big bully, but she also knew that something in their life happened to make them that way, and that she didn't give up on them. She didn't say, well, I'm just going to go give you to the pound and let them do whatever they want with it. I'm going to make sure that at least the life that they have is loved here, even if it doesn't want to be loved.
Absolutely. It just showcases her humanity so beautifully. Here were these strays, these animals that were either forgotten, abandoned, or had never had a chance at a good, solid home life with love and care and attention. And she was all in, regardless of the personality or the difficulties. And doesn't that say something, not just about animals, but about the way that the lesson that we can all live in our lives? Hey, let's look around us, and who's there and who's around us, and who are we not ever going to give up on.
Yeah, for sure. Now, there's one thing that I really loved, and I actually think this is perfect for Women's History Month to say this. This is, we have a bad habit in our society of dampening women's passions. Anger or frustration, no matter how valid, are held against us. We are labeled hysterical. We are labeled crazy cat ladies. Betsy owned her anger. She didn't apologize for her passions. She was a straight shooter. Yeah, my kind of people. And I think that's perfect, because that basically did encompass what Betsy was from reading the book. And I love the fact that you talked about that, and you talked about it wasn't, you're not dampening Betsy's passion or her voice by telling her story.
Yeah, thank you. It was that passion that really intrigued me. Like I said, that zest for life that she had. And I loved that, as you said, she owned the label. In her draft, it was perhaps mentioned more times than it needed to be. One of those small things that it was easy to edit out without taking out the idea behind it, the concept behind it, that Betsy was proud of who she was. She was known about town as the person who would absolutely talk about what was necessary to rescue these strays and to take care of them. Chips was also very clear when we were talking. She wrote it in her stories too, but Chips was able to clarify that this was a passion of hers, but it wasn't that she felt she needed to be the one to go out and rescue them all. In some of her stories, she's clear that, hey, let me tell you how to do it. You go, you see a cat, you go and do it. You don't have to call me to come and do it. And it took its toll. There's a lot of work, and there's a financial commitment as well. So she was all in despite everything. And she wasn't going to let any of that, or what anyone else said about her or her efforts, she wasn't going to let anything stop her.
Yeah, that's true. And I love that. And I love also how you talk about it's difficult to share Betsy's enthusiasm, optimism, positivity, despite her choice words to the meth man. I love that. But through Oliver's tale, I could live it. So let's talk about Oliver.
Oliver was just so sweet. It was a story that just felt like, you were just so happy that there was the ending that it was. Like, it just made you feel good to know what she was able to do for for all of them, not just Oliver, but especially Oliver as well.
So why do you think you connected so well with Betsy in this book? Because a lot of authors, like when they're co-authoring or when they're ghostwriting, they connect, they get a feel, but like you really wanted to be friends. You felt like if you met her in real life, you would be friends with her. So what was that connection besides the stories that she's telling?
I think that I saw in her a passion that I also feel, and this intensity about how to go about expressing it. Your comment about how often women's passions and angers and emotions are dampened and considered hysterical or not quite right. I've certainly experienced moments like that in my own life. I feel that same kind of passion and intensity that I believe I recognized in Betsy. So she felt like a kindred spirit.
So what did you learn from her devotion to animals without having known her? What did you learn?
I loved her authenticity, and it was something that you could argue was in other parts of her life as well, I'm sure, but again, I was focusing mostly on her animal welfare advocacy and her work with her animals and her pets. But she was, in her story, she was willing to be all in as Betsy. She was putting herself, as much as she didn't purposely start out, hey, I'm going to write about myself. As I said, her voice came through. She was willing to put herself out there. And that authenticity about, this is how I feel about pets. This is how I feel about strays, about rescues. This is why I think we need to care for them. So she was intense about her passion and her integrity for the work that she did. And I think all of that, it just really resonated in an authentic way that helped me consider, hey, how do I want to live my own life? I felt this kindred spirit, as I just said. What did she do about it? What can I do about it? And how can I don't see myself in the same kind of animal advocacy role that Betsy did, but that doesn't mean that I can't show that passion and that authenticity of who I am out there in the world in other ways, in other situations. And I hope that other readers can feel the same kind of thing. There's an authenticity that maybe they too can get from the book that might inspire or encourage them to be who they truly are.
So if you had the opportunity to co-author another book with someone who comes to you again and says, hey, my husband or wife have written this book and I want it out because it's their legacy, would you jump on the chance, or would you have to wait and read the novel and see or the manuscript and see exactly if it fit into what you thought?
No, actually, I would jump on it right away. If you had asked me before, I would have said, oh, no, I think I would have needed to see. And because Betsy just spoke to me right from the start, it was an easy answer. Of course. So, but the experience also showed me how I could get to know someone. And there's some prejudgments and that we all have when we go into starting to, read a book. In this case, me learning about Betsy, I wouldn't want to presume that about somebody else who came to me and said, hey, I have this manuscript or I have this story either written by or about my significant other or my family member or whatever. This experience of writing with Betsy gave me the confidence to say, you know what, my mind is open. Let's see who else I can meet.
Oh, I love that. Now, how long did it take you from the time that you first got the manuscript and where her husband approached you to actually finishing the book? How long did that take?
My goodness, I think it must have been about a year and a half, give or take a little while. I don't have the exact dates in my head. Because there was first the work of the edits, and then there was, back and forth with Chips about just like, hey, what does the story look like just from her edits about her stories. And then, as I said, there was an evolution toward me thinking, like, I was working with Chips already before I came up with this brilliant idea, what if? And so there was an evolution toward that. And then after Chips and I said, let's try this, it was an experiment. We both went into this realizing maybe this won't work. So I was absolutely willing to put in the time. Let's see what happens with this. But there was a little bit of a revamping that had to happen from the edits I'd been working on before in order to make more sense in the narrative. I changed some of the order of the stories around in the final version of the book than what I had been doing in the edits earlier. So, and then obviously I wanted to give Chips time to read and review it as well, to ensure that I wasn't making not just any kind of factual errors, but that I was reflecting as much about what he wanted the legacy to be. So yeah, I guess very long answer to your short question, maybe about 1.5 years.
So how long was it when you got the manuscript and you started editing? Did you come up with the brilliant idea, I want to co-author it with her?
It was actually, it was a few months into the process. It was I think that I was, so my process is to read through the full manuscript, the draft first. And I make notes as I go, and I just have some ideas, and definitely was not thinking of, maybe I could, jump on this as a co-author. I was not thinking of that at the time. It was only as I started to dive into the edits, when I was looking at each story more closely, which meant I was studying the stories and therefore studying Betsy and her personality and her voice. And I was starting to shift some of the elements within each story around. It was still a very individual story 1, story 2, story 3. And that's when I started to feel like it feels a little bit stilted as I'm putting the manuscript together. And I knew that there was a better flow. And so I played around with, as I said, a different order of the stories, some of them chronological, some of them fit better together. A bunch of stories put together into one bigger story. And it was at that point where I started to realize, how can I smooth this out? That I started to think, wait, maybe there's another way. And that's when I took the idea that I had at the very beginning, oh my God, I wish I could meet Betsy, into this, because it was like, what would I tell Betsy? What would I say to her if we were working together on this? And I'm suggesting, hey, we need to smooth out these stories. What would I, as her book coach, say to her? And that's what got me thinking about, well, we need something smoother. We need a thread. We need what could this be? And that's when I started to think, maybe that my experience of getting to know Betsy could be the thread that we were otherwise missing. And so it was a few months into the process when I finally approached Chips about that and said, what do you think?
So that's what I'm going to ask you. You had the idea. How long? You said a few months into the process where you approached him, but how long from the time you created it, you thought in your head, I need to walk alongside her and co-author it with her, did you approach her husband about it? Because I think that had to, like you said, that was a bold move on your part. Did you sit on it for a while, or did you just automatically say, hey, let's do this?
No, I jumped on it right away because I thought that I might talk myself out of it otherwise.
Love that.
Yeah, no, Chips and I had a working relationship by this point. It wasn't like, I was approaching some stranger out there and, being so bold as to say this. So that absolutely helped, of course. But I really threw it out there with, I have nothing to lose. I'm still going to help, even if he had said no, I was still going to help him edit this story in a way that was going to be the best that I could do as a behind the scenes editor. Absolutely. So I guess I took a risk by thinking there's really not that much of a risk. I ask him, he says no. We go back to doing it in a more conventional way. I ask him, he says yes. Wow, maybe we can make something different out of this. So because my first reaction was like, oh my God, he's going to say no. What am I thinking? This is kind of silly. Like, I don't know about this. So that was my first reaction. And then my second one was, wait a second, there really is no risk. He says no, he says no. And so I thought, okay, I better do it before I think anything more, before I overthink it anymore. And just, okay, what do you think? And yeah, he got back to me really quickly and said, what would that look like? Like, so we had a discussion about it for sure. He wasn't just like, okay, yeah, go off and, do what you do. Like he said, absolutely, I'm interested. Let's chat. So, we had another talk. I said, what if? I said, I can't guarantee it. What if I just try it? And all credit to Chips for saying, yeah, let's see what can happen here. I wanted to include my own it's a memoir that includes some of my own memories as well, my own experiences, and I wanted it to be like that. So I wanted him to be clear that it really was from my perspective as well. It wasn't just going to be Betsy's perfect, Betsy's wonderful. And so I wanted to make it clear to Chips my vision of how to honor Betsy, and he was all for it. It was obviously, we didn't know until I sent him that first draft. I thought it was coming together great. So when I sent him the first draft of both of our stories together, my part and Betsy's part, I was like, I think this is working. And then I sent it to him, and sitting on pins and needles for a little bit while he took the time to go through it and read it. And he came back and he said, yes, I like this. And there was still some editing, a little bit of work to do to, again, that was a draft. And so the writing process takes a couple of drafts to get right, but I think we changed a few more stories around. I think we conflated a couple. I don't recall the exact details right now, but there was a little bit of collaboration between us. But he had the same vision in his mind that I did, and he was really absolutely happy to see my portion interwoven with Betsy's as a way to highlight the Betsy that I got to know.
So when you were doing that and you were writing, did you send him like the first couple of chapters where you interwove, or did you just full out write the whole thing and send the whole thing to him one time?
Yeah. We had that discussion too. I had suggested it might be better because honestly, I had all these stories set out, like, as I said, from the first time I was going through my edits. I wasn't sure how I wanted to structure the whole thing. And I thought it wouldn't be fair. It wouldn't be a fair picture of my overall vision with just a couple of stories here and there. I thought that it would be better for him to really appreciate what I was trying to get at if I had that full draft ready for him. And he was like, yeah, absolutely. Take the time you need. So yeah, he let me have the creative room that I needed in order to put it together.
And I guess by that time you said you had such a great working relationship with Chips that you kind of, like, he trusted you with the legacy and trusted not to make the story about you, but about Betsy, but interweave what you learned from Betsy and during that. And I love that, parts of your life with that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. It was certainly, well, I don't know if risk is the right word on his part, a leap of faith on his part that I wouldn't make this whole story all about me. But on the other hand, I wanted to make sure that I was included because it was my own journey to learning about, not just learning about Betsy, but to learning about, as I said, this authenticity, this sense of passion, this idea of confidence moving forward. Like, that's what I got out of the book. And that was so valuable to me, which is why I wanted to share it. That's what I thought was going to be really helpful, is me as this guide for the reader. I couldn't do that without talking about myself and my own experiences. Chips was ready to take that risk and take that leap of faith. And I'm glad that he did, because I'm really pleased with the way that it turned out.
Now, our time is almost up. Before we talk about where we can find the book and where people can find you, I'm going to give you like a few minutes to either reiterate something that we talked about, or maybe something that we haven't talked about that you want to share. The platform is yours right now.
Thank you. Well, I hope that people will go out and read the book, because this is one of those things because I've already published some other books. I'm a young adult fantasy author, and I love working on those books myself. It was very, it was less collaborative necessarily, right? Even though Betsy wasn't alive, I was still working with Chips. I was still working with Betsy's memories. And so I loved that idea in writing. That was a little bit different of an experience for me. And so I just love this idea of being able to share Betsy with the world. And it was because of who Betsy was, this vivacious, zesty, vibrant personality. She's such an amazing woman, and she's such an amazing inspiration. And She loves animals. So if you
No.
love animals and love a heartfelt story, then I would suggest you go and read it. Not even for my part, but just how I can be your guide to show you not just is Betsy fantastic, her message is great, and her stories are just so hilarious and funny and cute and heartwarming.
For sure. Now, where can people find you?
Yeah, my website's the easiest, jenbraaksma.com.
And that's where they can find all your socials and everything else on there.
Yeah,
And
and they're welcome to, my email address is on my website too. So if they want to contact me directly, they're able to do that as well.
and where can you find Befriending Betsy?
Anywhere books are sold. So independent booksellers, even if they don't have it, is something that they can order for you. So you can just ask them specifically. The Amazon for sure. It's available there. In Canada, here in our big Indigo bookstore, they have it available too. So yeah, anywhere books are sold, you should be able to find it.
And if you're like me and you like to shop online, that QR code in the corner will get you right over to Amazon and get you right over to the book. So Jen, thank you for coming on, and thank you for taking up the cause of Betsy, because some people would have said, no, I don't want to write a book. That's going to be somebody else's, talk about somebody else. But the way you wove your stories in with hers was, sometimes I didn't know who at what point, who was talking, whose story it was. And I had to go back and reread some of the section because you did it so seamlessly that, you felt like you were kindred spirits with both you and Betsy. So thank you so much for writing your book.
Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to chat more about Betsy too.
All right. So guys, I will put in the show notes everywhere you can find the book, and you can find Jen. And please adopt, don't shop. And please, if you get your pets, have them spayed and neutered, because that helps with the pet population as well. And here's looking to more Jen and Betsy's out there in real life. Until next time, guys. Bye.